Welcome to this episode of Pondering Play and Therapy. And this week, my guest is Marguerite Hunter Blair, OBE. She is the Chief Executive of Play Scotland. She established the Scottish Play Commission in 2007 and led the campaigns for Scotland's Play Strategy in 2013 and the Statutory Duty for Play in the Planning Scotland Act 2019. Marguerite is Chair of the Play Strategy Refresh Group and Vice Chair of Planning Aid Scotland and Secretary of IPA Scotland, formerly CEO of Playboard Northern Ireland and Community Services Manager, Belfast City Council. Wow, Marguerite, there's loads to unpick on there. But the first thing that I just wanted to ask you was about the OBE, because as far as you're aware, this is the first and maybe only OBE given for play. Is that right?
Yes, thank you very much, Philippa, for inviting me onto the podcast today. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Yes, I had a very nice surprise before Christmas, an early Christmas present, when I received a letter from the Cabinet Office. And the citation was Chief Executive, Play Scotland, for services to play, to learning and to health. And as far as I know, it is the first acknowledgement of services to play. And while I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to have received this, as you well know, and your listeners will well know, that no one achieves these things, these progress for play, learning and health on their own. It is a team effort and you rely so much on the people around you and the timing and the opportunities that come your way. But it was really lovely to receive this acknowledgement, and the whole organisation, Play Scotland, and our membership have been absolutely delighted about it.
Congratulations, that is amazing. And I guess it's one of those, hopefully, moments where maybe people are starting to understand the importance of play and having play for children and young people, because it's something that I think maybe we've lost sight of over the last few years, even decades, really. So how did you start on your journey to being so involved in ensuring that children, particularly in Scotland and Northern Ireland, are having access to play?
I think what you say is so important, Philippa, that I think for a long time play was seen as a preschool thing, which it absolutely is. Please don't get me wrong. But it has such a contribution to make to children's learning, not just in preschool, but in the whole school, primary and secondary school context. It's really important to plan for play in the community. And it's really important that we support parents to play with children as well, and to allow them to play, to allow their children to play. Yes, I think it had been boxed in for a long time. And I think what we have a much greater awareness of around the world, particularly as a result of COVID, that play is actually at the heart of children's health and well-being. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly important, if only for that reason. There's lots of reasons, but if only for that reason, it is incredibly important. So first of all, I might say something to the listeners, because I do speak very quickly, so I will try not to do that. But I also have a strange accent, and that's because I'm actually from Scotland, but spent over 20 years in Northern Ireland working, and came back to Scotland about 20 years ago. So I think I have an Ailsa Craig accent now, which is halfway between Scotland and Belfast. So how did I get to be involved in play? It was quite an interesting journey. My master's was actually in adult education. And I had been really interested in working in African countries in this area. And in the end, love won out, and I met and married my husband, who is also from Scotland, but had gone to work in the Forest Service in Northern Ireland. And I was fortunate enough to work in a children's organisation for a short while, and then took up a post as a community worker for Belfast City Council, where I ended up becoming the community services manager responsible for community centres, the grant aid budget to the voluntary sector, And then I inherited some play centres, 6 play sites, and 16 play workers. And to be honest, a lot of the community centres that we had, with over 20 community centres, most of them were not purpose-built. They were converted churches and fire stations. And there was just never enough money to keep them up to date and refurbished the way we wanted them to be. So I initially had the thought that we would sell off these play sites that we had inherited from the Parks Department and use the money to improve the community centres. But a lovely community worker called Moya Hines came in to me one day and sat down and said, I need to tell you something really important. And I was like, oh, Moya, I'm so busy. What is it? And she went, spice. I need to tell you all about spice. Sit down and listen about spice. And when I do presentations about play now, I quite often take a picture of the Spice Girls with me because I think it's a fantastic acronym as to why play is so important for children and young people. So S for social, P for physical, I for intellectual, cognitive development, C for creativity, and E for emotional. So a very short acronym, and it covers so many things. And yes, we could say it's oversimplistic, and it possibly is, because it doesn't mention the big words like social and emotional learning, resilience, but it means all of that. You know, it's social skills, physical skills, brain development, creativity, and emotional well-being. So it's a very nice acronym. And not long after that, I went on a course with colleagues from the Parks Department, a course being held in Wales. And it was a diploma on managing and developing play provision. And after that, I was a big fan and really understood it. And so when I left Belfast City Council, I went to Playboard Northern Ireland as chief executive. And I was there for 4 years. And then we came back to Scotland, and Play Scotland were in touch. And I thought I would do a wee bit of work with them for a short time because the office was quite far away from where I lived. So I said I might do 6 months. And I've just clocked up 19 years. So I'm not very good at counting, put it that way. But it's been a fantastic journey for play. And as I say to children and young people, when we ask them what they want to be, I didn't even know there would be such a job as chief executive of Playboard Northern Ireland or Play Scotland. And so not to worry too much when they're young about what they want to be, but more to focus on doing the things that they enjoy doing and feel that they're good at.
And during this journey, have got play enshrined in law in Scotland? Is that right? That children have legally got the right to have the space to play?
Yeah. So there's quite a good policy framework for play in Scotland. And that's really been the campaigning journey that we've been on in Play Scotland, where we've tried to put in place national measures to improve play locally. And the reason we went down a legal duty route was because we did keep coming up with lots of recommendations and lovely tools. And some local authorities would dip in and out of those, which was fantastic. But a legal duty makes it mandatory, and a legal duty means everyone has to do it. And one of the things that we've really been trying to get in Scotland since 2007 was for local authorities to create baselines of how much play they had and how much they spent on play. And of course, the first thing they ask you then is, what's your definition of play? Are you including playgrounds? Are you including parks and open spaces? Are you talking about school grounds? You know, the whole thing starts to grow. And we did a simple survey back in 2007 when we asked local authorities about, you know, to tell us, do their own audit and tell us about what, if they had a play strategy, a play policy, how much play they had, how much they spent on play. And we did a very simple calculation where what they told us they spent on play, we divided that by the number of children and young people in the authority. And we came up with a very crude, rough measure of how much each local authority spent on each child's play opportunity. And I recognise that Sheffield University have just published a study this week, much more advanced and sophisticated than what we did then, but it was similar. It was, how much do you spend? You divide it in, and this is what you get. So what some local authorities complained about is that creates a ranking straight away. And a lot of people said, we didn't include this and we did include that, and they included this and we didn't. So this idea that we had to have a national measure, that everyone measured the same thing. And we thought maybe every 2 years, possibly in October, so it didn't get a summer skew, create the baseline. And the purpose of the baseline would be to allow people, the authorities, to measure improvements every few years. So it wasn't about naming and shaming. It wasn't about ranking, because we understand why local authorities are concerned about that. No two local authorities are alike. They've got their own priorities. They need to set their own priorities. They've got their own stress points that they know what they are. But we felt it was really important that children had adequate play opportunities and experiences. And how would you know that if you hadn't measured what you've got and asked families and young people if they were satisfied with that and then tested it again? So very simply, that's what we were trying to do in Scotland. Now, we were on a long journey, which I'm not going to unpick here. But alongside that, we also were campaigning for a national play strategy, and that children's right to play would become the law in Scotland. So those were the big asks, and these are the big asks that we now have. So the play policy framework in Scotland now, first of all, has in the Planning Act of 2019, it has a play sufficiency duty, which is a requirement on all local authorities to carry out an assessment, a play sufficiency assessment about how many play spaces they've got, how accessible they are, how satisfied children and young people and families are with those. And they carry out that assessment, and the evidence report that is compiled from the assessment feeds into local development plans. And we've got another lever in the planning box as well, or another toy in the box, which is called National Planning Framework 4, which is our umbrella spatial strategic planning framework. And we consulted with children and young people for the government on this framework and on the regulations and guidance around play sufficiency. And as a result of that, we actually have 3 extremely good policy lines in the National Planning Framework. And these policy lines are what the local development plan is mapped against. So we have one there specifically about play opportunities. We have one about access to open spaces and green spaces. And we've one there about active travel. And each of these is really important for children's play opportunities. So it's really good. There's 3. It's been spread out into 3. So that's one part of the policy framework in Scotland. The second part is the fact that we now have a legal duty for play because the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child has been fully incorporated into Scots law as of July last year. And that means that there is a legal right to play. In the planning legislation, the legal duty is for children and families to be consulted in the play sufficiency assessment and for the evidence to go forward into local development plans. That of itself is not a legal right to play. But having UNCRC in Scots law, and as many of your listeners will know, Article 31 is the child's right to play. Article 15, the right to hang about in the public realm and associate with their friendship groups, the right to an education, right to a good start in life. Many rights in there contribute to children's right to play at home, in learning environments and in the community. So these are big step forwards. And then alongside this, the third part of the policy framework for us then is the fact that we have a new play strategy. We have an existing play strategy, which was published in 2013. And there has been an ongoing refresh of the play strategy post-COVID. We consulted with children and young people, and they told us that they had missed their fun, friends and family, and that they wanted more play and better play opportunities. And the government, the children's minister at the time, Claire Hockey, accepted their recommendations for a refresh of the play strategy. And the new play vision statement and action plan 2025 to 2030 is being published later on this month. So I'm sorry we're not having this conversation at the end of the month, but it will be something for your listeners to listen out for. And I can talk a little bit about it. but only a little bit at this stage.
That would be fantastic, just to give us a little overview. But my first question about that is, it sounds wonderful, and from a professional's point of view, where all our lives, mine and Julie's, is all about play and the importance of play, whether you're a teenager or a baby, it sounds very ahead of the time, really, in some ways, in that lots of people aren't doing it, and really behind the times in the fact that actually, really, should we having to be only now enshrining these things in law, and that other people aren't. I guess from a professional point of view, I think it's amazing. But what I wonder for parents, if parents listen to this, I wonder what they would see. So you've done this amazing work over the last 20 years, really, to get this into Scottish law, into Parliament. You've got these commitments. But then what does that mean for children and families? What are they going to see in Scotland?
It's really interesting. I might talk a tiny bit about the new Play Vision Statement and Action Plan coming out, because it's underpinned by a play theory of change. And the three drivers in this play theory of change are parents, first and foremost, practitioners, which includes educators, and place. And obviously there's underlying themes of poverty and participation. But to go back to the question you've asked me, parents are so important. You could say in some ways the parents are the gatekeepers of play, and it's up to those of us who have worked alongside the professionals and the researchers and all the people involved in children's development to make the case to parents as to why it's so important. And of course, the parents nowadays, I'm a parent, I have 5 children grown up now, but you have such a big responsibility and you're judged so harshly by your peers and by society if you are seen to be allowing your child out where other people perceive it not to be safe. You cannot take away from the fact there's many more cars now than there ever was, that are legitimate concerns for parents as to what they can do. And I think some of us have slightly been lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that our children are playing online. Yes, they're getting social connection and they're getting a lot of stimulation. And we do think that maybe that's a safer option. We have thought that perhaps up until quite recently, when that has all fallen away from us and we realise actually it's a very scary place and we need to pay complete attention and not sleepwalk into something that we haven't really understood. But change is happening very fast. So parents are so important and we need to give so much support. And we do have a lot of play resources on our website. We have a parent club website in Scotland that is managed by the Scottish Government. We have Parenting Across Scotland. There's lots of places because we recognise that actually parents are so important. And alongside that, we also know that even before COVID, children were becoming much more sedentary, indoors, not playing, not being engaging and being sociable with others, poor physical literacy and strength, overweight, and most worryingly of all, life expectancy stalled. So there was something known as the Millennium Gateshead Study, which is still going on to children born at the millennium at the turn of this century. And they're being followed by the Gateshead Study. And they had published some findings in 2017, which were I would consider quite alarming at that stage, suggesting that by age 7, children spent half of their day sitting down. And I think there was a sense that being school ready for children was being able to sit down for long periods of time and possibly tie your shoelaces, definitely being toilet trained. But what was our experience? Rather than thinking about to be school ready, you had to be curious, creative, fearless, autonomous learners. I think we've been in perhaps the wrong paradigm, I think, about what school readiness is all about. And being able to sit down, I would suggest, is not the number one requirement, particularly as we know boys up until the age of 8, the right-left brain development hasn't evened out. And so standing and learning is a much better offer for them than sitting and learning. So we know all these things. And as I say, if these were breakthroughs in cancer therapy, if we didn't apply them people would be quite rightly horrified. So when we know these things, we need to take them and use them to enhance children's learning and make it a better experience, but even more so to foster this innate sense to be curious and creative that our children and young people have. And I often think of the quote from Picasso. And if you don't know Picasso's work, if you go on and have a wee look, go on and have a look at it. And one of the features in a lot of his work is that one eye will be much bigger than another eye. And what Picasso says is he spent his whole life trying to paint as a child again, to see as a child and paint as a child again. And when you see his early drawings of a face not being, I've forgotten the right word for it, not being a match.
Symmetrical.
Yes, it's not symmetrical. But when children go to school and they start to draw a picture, if they don't draw a symmetrical picture of the two eyes, same size, the same place, they're steered away from that to say, no, this is what a face looks like. This is what a face looks like. But a child, because they will have such close proximity to their mum, their dad, their carers, their grandparents, their siblings, will actually know, because they do study things very keenly, they will know that the face is not symmetrical. So when they're then told that it is, there's a kind of learning going on there that takes away from what they actually know to be real and true. And I found that fascinating when I was lucky enough to go to the museum in Malaga where Picasso grew up, and you see his early sketches. And so many of them have this, we might see it as a distortion, but actually it's the reality of what a face looks like. So I just think that the problem is if we try and make everyone learn in the same way and remove this innate understanding and learning and curiosity that the child has formed even before they were born, and we try and mainstream it and put it into a particular way, we're losing a lot. We're losing a lot. We're really losing the next generation of innovators, designers, creators. And it's really important that we don't do that. So I think, though, as a parent, when your child goes to school, you worry. You want them to be able to read and write. You don't want them to be leaving school 3 years behind the reading and writing age. We're really motivated. Most parents want their children to do really well, and they want to do what they can to support them. So I think it's really important that we make the case to the parents as to why play is the best form of learning. It's the one they start with, and it's the one that we need to foster as much as we can throughout their life, not just in the school environment and learning environments, but in their home life and in their community life, because as we know, when we come into work life, it can be very stressful, and we have to be able to play, to wind down and relax. So these are actually life skills that children need to realize and appreciate are really important, and we need to try and ensure that they retain these life skills so that they have this good work-life balance throughout their life, because it looks like they're going to be working for a very long time as the pension age worryingly keeps going up. So you want them to find something that they're interested in, that they're good in, that they want to get up to do every day. And you want them to have things that they can use then afterwards to relax and have some downtime.
Yeah. When you were talking, there was so many things going through my mind, really, and I have loads of questions. But one of the big ones is that I think plays change. You talked about that, about it going online, but I also think Julie and I have talked about play being more pressured for parents, about getting it right and getting the right toys and the right situation and having this amazing craft table all set up or all the dolls lined up and those sorts of things. But I'm wondering if actually what some of you're introducing is that actually play just being outside in a field or being in a park or just being in a community centre where there's connections and you can be playing with a football or playing with the top of a pop bottle. It doesn't really matter. Play is about those connections, creativity, joy, rather than always this staged expectation that sometimes can come over on social media that this is the way we should play now. Would that be correct?
I think you're right. And I think I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, and the one thing that absolutely blows me away when I see her at play or playing away is improvisation. Do you know? And she'll find maybe a napkin or a piece of kitchen roll or something, and this is the baby's nappy, and the baby is possibly a little dog that our older children had when they were young, or what's left of a knitted scarecrow, and this is the baby, and this is the baby's nappy, and this is the baby's blanket. And it's this constant improvisation. The baby's having milk, and you turn around and she's found a pen or the back of a pen, and that's the bottle that she's using. Or, do you know, and it's constant improvisation. They've got something in their head. And of course, the worst thing you can do as an adult, and we do it without even thinking, is, oh, that's not that, or that's not that, or here, take this, that's more like it. Now, yes, if you're handing a tea towel or something and saying, oh, yes, that could be the baby's blanket or the baby's, but if you actually go and get what it is they want, then it's not improvisation anymore. And I think this instinct in the parent, because we want the best for our children, is almost to take over. So when they're playing with maybe some letters and pretending this is this letter and that letter, you just want to jump in and say, oh, this is your letter for your name. And then suddenly that's anxiety, because then they're trying to do it right. They know you want them to have the right letter for their name. Whereas up until then, they're just playing at making a name and pretending that's their letters for their name. They don't really know what the letters are. And they're just pretending, and they're having a great time till you leap in there and try and put them right. So I think this, and I'm just using that as an example because I think improvisation is one of the keys to success. When things start to unravel, most of us have to go into improvisation mode, where we're planning a lovely event at the end of the month with our children's minister. The children's commissioner is going to be emceeing it. And because it's all online, we spent a lot of our last meeting talking about what was our plan B going to be. How are we going to improvise if things start to go wrong? And how can we do it playfully and blah, blah, blah. And children instinctively improvise in a playful way. And it's really interesting that we as adults then have to really think hard how to do that, because we've trained ourselves out of doing it. I just think the improvisation, the curiosity, the creativity, and this make-believe, they do play out what they see all the time. So you don't need to make the arts and crafts table on that. And you take them outside and honestly, they see these bugs in the grass that even with a magnifying glass I couldn't see. And Grandma, can you see the spider in the grass? Actually, no, I can't. So I just say, yes, I can. And a 6-year-old friend of ours recently said to me, oh, can you see the spider in the grass? And I said, no, I can't. And she said, yes. And she's got a sack on her back. And that means she's eaten the male spider and she's wrapped him up in her web and she's carrying on her back and she'll eat him later. And I said, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. But her grandma was actually a spider, still a spider expert, and has obviously told her this. She's completely absorbed it, then seen it for herself and repeated it back to me. Who had no idea about the life of spiders and how interesting it might be. So it is that they are so interested in nature. And yes, I do feel their brains are just so ready to learn. But all we can do, I think, is provide all the ingredients and let them go forward themselves. If we try and do it for them, then I don't think it really gets a sustained learning, and they need to be curious and interested. And in that example, not every child might be interested and curious about a spider. They might actually be scared of the spider, and that's okay as well. But it is trying to let them lead us in a way. And I know that would be hard for parents when you're trying to sort out dinner, homework, what they're wearing next day to school, or getting them ready for bed, calming them down. There's so many things that parents need to be worried about. And yes, the online presence and all the other things that are going on, maybe getting World Book Day dropped into them the night before. What am I going to wear tomorrow to be a character in World Book Day? Or the famous Easter basket as they're going out the door. Oh, we were supposed to all take an Easter basket this morning. So parents are under a lot of pressure. And whatever we can do to support them, I think is incredibly important that we do that.
And when we're thinking about getting children school ready, like you say, there's this, they need to read, they need to write, they need able to sit still, they need all these things. So we almost, I don't know, sometimes maybe the pressure is to formalize that within the home and almost start them on that journey of being at school or doing all these things at school way before they even get to school, because the pressure, like you say, is to get them ready. I suppose in my view, really children just need to be playing and not learning until they're at least 7, 8, 9. So even school for me is way too soon. But I'm wondering as a parent that that actually, if you're not doing that, you're worrying your children won't be ready. I wonder what your view is, that actually, if we let them use their imagination, if we let them talk to them, that actually they absorb more learning because they are curious about what does this word say, rather than formally sitting saying you're going to write your name. They become curious about it themselves and they can learn in a much more playful way. And I wonder if that stays with them longer than if they've had formal training, as it were.
I think it is that. I have struggled over the years with the development of computers and programs, and over COVID, everything moved online. We had to be able to do all these things. And, I didn't even have basic typing skills, really. People would say to me, oh, this is how you do this, and this is a shortcut for that. And they would quickly come onto your computer and do it for you. And of course, the only way really to learn is to do it yourself. You've got to join yourself. You've got to work out how to put the camera on, to put the sound on, if to hold your nerve if the whole system crashes and starts to update when you're just about to start speaking. So we've been through that process. And I think it is like that for children at the very beginning. What the learning they do for themselves, directed by themselves and practiced by themselves, is the learning that really stays with them and never leaves them. And that fearlessness about curiosity and work. Sometimes I look around in a room if you're presenting and it's not working, looking for the youngest person, because they're going to come up. And it's not that they know the right button to press. They're going to press lots of buttons and they don't really mind, so long because they know they will get the right one eventually. Whereas I would be scared to press the button in case the whole presentation disappeared. So I just think there's a fearlessness at the root of curiosity and creativity that we lose as we get older, or maybe because of the school system we came through, that has to be nurtured and fostered in young people. And this self-directed learning, as you call it, is so important. And what I would suggest, that we've loads of resources on our website, as have the other national play organisations, but one that is our biggest download is called the Play Types Toolkit. And we did it really to support play in school and to make it easy for teachers. So we mapped it against the curriculum for excellence in Scotland to say, if you do this type of play, what does that look like? What would you need to do? A bit like a recipe. What do you need to do? What does it look like? And where does this fit into the curriculum for excellence? So they could manage to map against the areas that they had to report on. But what is really nice is a lovely poster in it, and it's based on Bob Hughes' taxonomy of play types. And he talked about 16 types of play types. And it's really interesting because I think if I was saying to any parent, it's about trying to get children school ready or ready to learn. It's about trying to expose them to the widest type of play opportunities and experiences they can have, because we tend to talk about play and assume that everybody knows what we mean. And sometimes it's narrowed down to outdoor play and indoor play. So we're actually taking away as to dressing up play, risky play, challenging play, adventure play. Let's pretend. Let's reenact what we've just seen. If we've seen something where we don't understand, children will play it through to try and make sense of it. Symbolic, locomotor, mastery skills. There's just so many different types of play. So in a way, just using the word play, we're not doing a service to this as to the different experiences and opportunities we want children to have inside and outside, which actually stimulates brain development, it stimulates language, it stimulates social skills, because there is quite a high bar when you're a young person to be part of the group and how to stay part of the group. So you have to have the right social skills. If you go and bite somebody, then you'll not be invited into the group. You might not be allowed to stay. And so there's just lots of different cues that everyone learns to respond to. And I think this is just so important, because one of the things that happens when you go to school quite often, not all schools, but is you tend to then have to play in your age range. And as we know, when you come to the workplace, you don't go into the workplace and say, oh, I only want to work in my age range. You would just be laughed out the door. But actually, there's a very different way. And I look back now, I'm coming to the end of my career, and I look back to when I was younger and couldn't wait for some of these people just to get out the door so we could do things the way we wanted to do them and make changes and actually make mistakes that they probably knew we were going to make all over again. And they were trying to stop us from making them. But I look back now and realise that actually sometimes you can do things the same way again and get a different outcome. You don't always get the same outcome, but you do bring a different energy and enthusiasm and different approaches sometimes. But it's not all just to say that other people had that wrong. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying that we can learn from working across the generations. And I know one of my children, when he went into P1 and I asked him, did he have a friend? Yes, he did. And I was so pleased because some of the children he'd been at nursery with had gone to a different school. And I wanted to bring this friend home at the weekend. I was like, oh, yes, absolutely. And what's his name? And do we have a phone number? And it turned out his new best friend was in P7. And I initially was quite taken aback by that because I was expecting him to be in P1 with him. But apparently this person really liked playing football, as did my boy, and they just loved playing together. So we did have his friend at the house quite a bit. And it turned out there were sisters in the family that were across the same age range as some of our girls. So that was lovely, but it was just that we just expect children to only want to play in the age range, and we need to create opportunities for that to change. Because when I was young, we just played out with everybody in the area, didn't matter what age they were. And actually, looking back, the older ones were probably looking out for us younger ones. We just didn't realise it.
Absolutely. Julie and I often talk about that's what we did. We just played outside in the fields. And I recognise, like you said, that now, one is some of those spaces have gone where I used to play. There's loads of houses on it, or there's a lot more cars and those sorts of things. I will put a link to your website in the description of this so that people can access it. I just wondered, so we've talked quite a lot about younger children. Does your thinking include teenagers? What is that thinking around teenagers and older children?
It does include the older children as well, and it includes the secondary schools, not just primary schools, because we do have a play pedagogy award, which is a whole school approach to play-based learning for primary schools, and that's extending now into secondary schools. It's so important for teenagers to have, and this is where the word play becomes a problem again, because yes, a lot of teenagers will talk about play, they talk about hanging about, they like to gather in groups, as we know, and they have a right to under Article 15 of UNCRC. But older people in the community, adults don't particularly like to see that. So it's really important that we create spaces and places for them to be, that they co-design and co-produce, because it's hard to remember. Most of us try and pass over our teenage years. We don't dwell on them too much sometimes. So it's important that we let teenagers who are having a very different teenage experience than we had, where we might have queued up to use the phone in the hall and whisper into it. Their whole world is so different. And it's really important that we listen to what they want and we create these places for them and we allow them to co-create. And that's what the place efficiency assessments are allowing to happen in Scotland. And there's great examples in Glasgow where a lot of the schools, including the additional support needs schools, have been involved in this. And the local authority has set aside some money to allow them to co-design spaces, paying particular attention to girls feel less safe. Sometimes you would look at the statistics and know that boys are actually less safe outside, older boys, but actually girls feel unsafe. So it's really important that it creates spaces that meet their needs as well. And minority groups too, of children in different ethnic minority groupings. So it's really important. Inclusion is also incredibly important. And I was absolutely appalled to hear about a study that was done in Sweden about children with ADHD, suggesting that there was a difference in lifespan of 15 years. 15 years for children with ADHD. They would have a shortened lifespan. And that it's so important that we design the community to be less noisy, less stimulating, and they're the spaces that we want for all young people. Because what we do tend to find, and I'm going to steal from Gilles Penaloza here, who is a former mayor of Bogota, and what he said was, if a city is fit for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, then it's fit for everyone. And I would suggest as well, for people with ADHD and other additional needs, whether that's wheelchair use or crutches or parents with buggies, when you start to see, once we think about proper, inclusive and accessible design of spaces, we are actually creating better spaces for us all to live well locally. And that's one of the things that place efficiency has allowed in Scotland, is for children and young people to be part of the conversation about how to live well locally in your street, in your area of the city, and actually in the whole city, because that belongs to you too. So these are really important conversations that very often children were excluded from. And even if they were asked their opinion, there was no way of giving it due weighting. And I think it's incredibly important. And again, when I talk about if this was some learning to do with serious illness, we would all be paying huge attention and complaining if there wasn't mitigation taken and implemented. So now that we know these things, it's really important that we take full account of that when we design. And the fact is, one of the things we also really want out of this is we want young people to want to be planners and designers and landscape architects. And I'm not sure that's a profession that up until now, a lot of them would have been interested in and would have seen a purpose in for them and have seen any route into. So now I hope we're creating really positive routes into planning for children and young people so that they actually see this as a really important career, because as the Chief Medical Officer of Scotland, former one, Professor Sir Harry Burns said, place is at the heart of well-being. Place is everything. Where you grow up affects your health, your well-being, and your life chances. So place is everything. And the opportunities for play in the places you grow up are in there as well. So place is at the root of everything, I believe, and in children's life chances and well-being. And so we need to take it very importantly. And if we're looking at play and thinking about play in schools and play at home, and we miss out play in the community, then in some ways it doesn't matter what we do in those other domains, we'll never actually achieve a sustainable, lasting difference to make better use of where we grow up, where all of us grow up and live.
And do you think that play in areas where there's deprivation and poverty, because I work in an area where there's very high levels of deprivation, and I know in Scotland there are some towns and cities where they're in the top 10, like the area that I live in, where deprivation is pretty prevalent and poverty has massive impacts on families. Do you think play is accessible to those communities, or how do you make the play, the spaces, the opportunities more accessible?
There's been lots of research over the years about the poverty of play opportunities for children and young people in disadvantaged communities. And there's very strong evidence that play is a social justice issue and a spatial justice issue, just as you have described. And one of the things that happened during COVID is that became very noticeable when people had to stay at home and they're only allowed outside for a short space of time. The quality of the spaces mattered, and so many families, particularly in disadvantaged areas, can often be living in flats and in premises with no gardens. And so that was a particular difficulty for them. And so we know this is an issue for us, and we know that there can be quite a high incidence of brownfield sites in more deprived areas. And you only have to go into some communities to see closed up shop fronts. And this is what's so interesting when you ask children and young people then what they would like to see. They give a very consistent message. They want the removal of, they want clean spaces. What do they mean by clean and safe spaces? They mean no glass, no dog poo, no litter, and the removal of rubbish. Now, I can't think of any adult that doesn't want all those things as well. They're not asking for a destination play park at all, but they do want to be playing in and around where they live. And I don't think that's unreasonable, that we should be able to facilitate that. And yes, there can be some playing out models about children in streets, but they tend to be for 2 hours one Sunday of the month. That's not being able to play out locally. For me, it's better than nothing, some people would say. I think in some ways, I wonder, is it teaching children and young people that the rest of the time the car is king? And they are not. So actually, no, children have a right, in Scotland now, a legal right to play in and around where they live. And we need to work hard to actually accommodate that, because yes, we do have more traffic. We do have an outrageous amount of no ball game signs, which creates a very toxic culture for children being outdoors as well. Those need to be removed. And the problem is there's thousands of them. Local authorities don't even know where they all are. So there's lots of things that children and young people ask us for that are actually very simple and easily achievable. And they want to be able to play with their friends. They want to play in and around where they live. They also want access to affordable food in their area as well, and good food. So I don't think these are unrealistic asks. And I actually think they are very basic human rights that our children should be enjoying everywhere every day. And so it's really incumbent on the adults to step up to the mark now, because we do have all the talents that can achieve this. And some of it will cost money, but in the long term, we'll be saving money. We'll be saving money on the health budgets. We'll be saving money in other spheres as well, in how we have to support children who haven't had these good starts in life. So let's give them the best start in life. We know what it is. It's not as if it's not a really difficult science. What do children need to give them a good start in life? We know what it takes. So let's get the talents together and make this possible. And I think let's listen to what children and young people are telling us about their local communities, because they understand their communities. And when you walk around a local community with young children, you'll find they have their own names for things. Do you remember one group of children talking about the spooky post office? So I had to go back and look at it, and it really was a post office in a spar shop. And I don't know if you like to say spar, but I did wonder what made it spooky to them, but that was their name for it. Oh, the spooky post office. Okay, that was how they saw it. So yes, we need to know and pay attention to how they see where they live, rather than always looking at it on the lens of the adult.
And I think for me, just as we wrap up, as parents, as people, adults who are responsible and connected with children, the most important thing is that our children are happy, and that there's that joy, that they have those moments of joy, and that they have those opportunities. And I suppose play, for me, just even if you're living in really tricky situations or life is really hard, play can provide those moments of joy, of connection, of happiness. Even if it's only for 20 minutes while you're playing football on a pitch that's clean and not got broken bottles on, and you're connected with your friends, even if you then have to go home and life's a bit more tricky, at least play has given you that opportunity to experience a connection, a moment of joy, a break, really, sometimes from how hard lives can be. And for children to connect on all different levels, wherever they are, whether it's outside, whether it's inside, whether it's at school, like you say, going through different areas, we can connect and learn about families and children who maybe aren't in our realm of everyday families. And it just provides so much more than let's play for 5 minutes and learn how to write our name. And it's that greater extent, isn't it?
You're so right. When we asked children after COVID how they were feeling and what they would like to see happen next, they told us that they had missed fun, friends, family, and for me, quite incredibly, they said freedom. Now, I was astonished at that. We'd done lots of consultation with children and young people over the years. The word freedom had never come into that, but they really recognised that this freedom to come and go had extended beyond the parents. Normally it's the parents that are saying, yes, you be out to this time, or yes, you can go there. No, you can't go there. Yes, I'll take you there. I'm not happy if you go there on your own, you'll need to go with someone. So normally the gatekeepers, as I talk about it, were the parents. And suddenly it was more than that. Even the parents were being guided about what was allowed and what wasn't allowed, which was a really big pressure on the parents. But this missing out on fun, and the way the children described it was they wanted more play and better play opportunities. And I think that very much talks to what you were talking about there, about the poverty of play in disadvantaged areas. And actually maybe in families where there's a lot of activities going on, but they're not directed by the children, and the children maybe are quite happy doing something on their own and quite absorbed in it, but then maybe they've got to go to lessons or training or other things that parents think are maybe more important. So it is a balancing act. And one of the things that children tell us a lot about is about access to green and open spaces. And it really intrigues me, because I think intuitively and instinctively, in the same way that children have natural posture until the age of 8. You watch any child, the way they sit, the way they stand, the way they hold themselves, this beautiful natural posture. I think they innately know that they need to be near green spaces to be happy. I think they just know that. I think we know it, we forget it on our journey, and then we need to be reminded about it, and then we have to make a huge effort when we're older to get the steps in and get ourselves out to these green spaces. But I just think in terms of when you see children with this very natural posture, I think innately they know they should be in and around green and open spaces, and they tell us that, even if they don't have that access, so they seem to know about it. Now, it's very interesting to me that children, even in Glasgow, in high school, some of them, when their teacher was speaking to them a few years ago, had never been to the sea. And I thought that was very interesting because actually Glasgow isn't that far from the sea. Do you know, I've had to guess at this stage, I would say 20 miles, maybe 25 miles. It's not that far. Obviously, we live on an island, the UK. But it was also something that came through in a lovely video I saw from Northern Ireland, from the May Murray Foundation. And it was those young people and children who have profound, complex additional needs. And they had wanted to get to the beach and they wanted to do a litter pick and play on the beach, in fact. And so one of the local authorities had said, oh, yes, we've been thinking about this and we've actually got a plan in place. And what they'd done was they'd removed some of the seawall and put big perspex panels in there so that children with complex additional needs could see the sea. And of course, they rejected this and said, no, we want to be on that beach in the sea. And of course, if you want true inclusion, inclusive play, there's one thing to be accessible paths and make things accessible for young people to get there and have accessible, inclusive play equipment. But actually, true inclusion requires infrastructure. You do need toilets, changing facilities, perhaps car parking as well. If children with additional complex needs want to be at the seaside, they maybe even need showering facilities there as well. So there's a whole campaign and plan then with local authorities in Northern Ireland to achieve this. And this lovely young woman, Talia, who's 16 now, famously in the film, gets down onto the beach for the first time at 16 years of age. And she speaks through a voice monitor because she's nonverbal. And she says, her first words are, "Did you know the sea was salty?" And of course, we all know the sea is salty, but she didn't. And it's so moving. And I was thinking how it took her to 16 to be able to experience that. But actually, we've also got children in disadvantaged communities that are living not that far from the sea that haven't experienced that either. So this accessibility is a big issue. And much that I think a lot of young people instinctively know they should be near green and open spaces, they should also be near the elements. They should be near the sea. They should be near experience the wind and these different experiences. So when they go to a play park, I'm back to talking about inclusive play here, there can't just be a swing or a roundabout that's put in. There should be lots of different experiences in that play park for those children, for all children to experience. And it goes back to what we said earlier on. If we're actually designing for everyone, there is a better play experience. Because I can still remember the wheelchair swing that's locked off because it's very heavy. The original ones were very heavy and they were locked off and they were sited away from the main play park. So children had to go and play on their own. So even when they got to the play park, they were excluded, do you know? So you had to have the key to open it. So I think we're getting a lot better at understanding what makes inclusive play and what the barriers are. This is what we really need to get our head around. What are the barriers and how we overcome them? And we've no shortage of designers, manufacturers, and landscape architects. And so I think it's just about, as I say, bringing all the talents together, listening to what children and young people are telling us, and moving into that co-production, co-design phase that I think we're ready for in Scotland now that we're into the implementation phase. And I actually don't think that other countries like yourself, like England, are far behind. I think there's big discussions going on now there with the Play Commission going on in England, a lot of conversations going on in Northern Ireland, and Wales, of course, have their own legislation framed slightly differently from Scotland and have had play sufficiency for over 10 years now. So we're all at different ages and stages of development, I would suggest. And it's really important that we learn from that and people don't have to start at the beginning. There's different ways you can pick up on these discussions and different aspects of making the children's right to play a reality for them here and now. And because that's what we really want is children to have a good childhood and have lots of fun. As you say, Philippa expressed so eloquently, we want them to have fun here and now because there will be challenging things go on in their lives around them. That's real life. But it's really important that they get good quality play experiences, which will actually support them through the more difficult things in their childhood.
My last question was going to be, how do you think we're doing? And I think you've just summed that up amazingly. Is there anything that you think I didn't ask that maybe you think the listeners would be interested in, or that I didn't ask that you wanted to cover?
Not really. I do think if you're putting up our website, it's definitely worth putting up Play England's, Play Wales, and Playboard Northern Ireland, because they're full of things for parents, they're full of things for practitioners and planners. So I think it's really, there's a wealth of resources there. There's London Play as well. Leeds is fantastic at doing stuff now. Leeds Play, you'll find it, I think it's Let's Play Leeds or something they call it. So there's lots of really good stuff out there, and it's just encouraging. We're just trying to motivate people to be interested enough to look up. And at the end of the day, a lot of people put a lot of effort into trying to make things more play friendly for families and parents and practitioners, planners and other professionals who don't realise that play has got something to do with them, even if it's not in their job description, but the strategic decisions that they make. I'm thinking of people planning roads, planning pavements, trying to maintain 20's plenty. These people don't realise that they have a huge contribution to make to children's opportunities for play. So we call them unusual suspects. And we're always on the lookout for them, always on the lookout for them.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, I'll put those in the description of the episode. I will put a link to as many of these things as possible so that parents and professionals and whoever hopefully listens to this can access it. Thank you very much, Marguerite, for being on Pondering Play.
All those things.